scale?
It's been a winding road, very long
Okay.
one. I went to school for data science and machine learning back in the 90s when that first hype cycle started, and I graduated just as it ended.
Okay.
So I thought I was going to graduate, go work for Microsoft and do work on cool AI, and no one wanted that. So I went into traditional software development and software engineering roles, ended up working at every phase of the software development lifecycle, built and led teams, worked in product management for a while. 2012, I started V Squared. Around 2008, 2009 was when BI started showing up. Got into analytics 2010, 2011, and then 2012, all of a sudden data science became a thing. Companies wanted more than just BI and advanced analytics. So I started V Squared in 2012, got my first few clients in that year, worked with, originally it was very large companies on
Hmm.
data projects, getting more advanced into machine learning methods as the field progressed, as data sets got bigger, as the cloud resources got more pragmatic. I should say what we were
Yeah.
doing in 2012. I don't know if you could really call that data science. We didn't have everything we needed back then.
Yes.
But about 2014, 2015, realized that the only way we could do interesting projects was to get
Hmm.
the C suite on board. Had to get a C suite sponsor because the budgets were just, they're pretty big. Doing data
Yes.
science is not cheap. And that's what brought me back over to the strategy side. I'd published in 2013 on more traditional business strategy, but started in 2014 and 2015 building out this construct of data strategy, AI strategy. How are those products different? How are they monetized differently? And was extremely successful with some of these approaches. In 2017, opened up HROI as we did seminars back then, just face-to-face seminars until the pandemic. Now we have online classes. I teach data product management and AI, data and AI strategy, teach strategic leadership. So it's been a wild journey from wanting to do data science to finally getting to do it. And now I'm helping businesses make money with it. It's and teaching students how to do the same thing. It's been a
Yeah.
wild ride.
Yeah, that's quite a journey. And I would say that you having that education and the groundwork done at the right time and still waiting long before that actually, gets to the forefront. It's amazing. And 2012 is when you mentioned about V squared. So how and when did you make a transition from quote unquote corporate to choosing to be an entrepreneur? Yeah.
It was literally overnight. I was laid
Okay.
off in 2012. The
Okay.
company that I was, yep, the company I was working for decided to close the entire office. I was running a multi big team. Well, not really big team, but it was big for me. How about that? And
Yeah.
they decided to lay the entire office off at the same time. And I had been trying to get clients for almost a year up to that point. And then
Mhm.
finally, mid April, got my first client after being laid off, had to start the business overnight. It was chaos. It wasn't exactly how you would plan on starting a business, but it ended up working out really well. I thought I was going to be doing marketing analytics and customer
Hmm.
behavioral analytics. Nope, supply chain. Supply chain was the first company that wanted to work with me, wanted to work on a supplier discovery use case. So that's where I began, got into the marketing side, and finally did get back to decision support, doing behavioral modeling. Finally, it seems to be the theme of my career. Wanted to go one way, it didn't work out, but finally end up working my way back into doing what I'm interested in.
Yeah, that's a story of resilience. I didn't know that. So I think
Yep.
we as an industry are going through a tough phase altogether now because of the
Yeah.
macroeconomic condition. And the last I know, and people are comparing, is with 2008 fiasco. So
Mhm.
little did I know that in between some people also went through those situations, and that, like you mentioned in
Yep.
2012, that happened with you. How do you build that resilience? How do you pull yourself together? How long does it take to kind of show up again and say that whatever happened has happened, and this is the advice maybe people in the industry need today, because a lot many are going through the same
Yes.
situation. What is your 2C for them?
What I have to say is first, if you're getting laid off, if you're getting laid off early in this cycle, in some cases,
Mhm.
you're lucky
Mhm.
because you didn't get the burnout. that the rest of
Hmm.
us went through, and that's what we don't talk a whole lot about, is the layoffs and the downsizing started in 2007. So most organizations, by the time we get to 2009, 2010, they're running understaffed. And so
Yeah.
there was an entire 2 year time span where people were getting burned out. Don't be in that position. It is one of the worst things that can happen to your career because it takes a few years to recover from that level of burnout. So the
Hmm.
first piece of advice I have is when you find yourself in an understaffed situation, don't destroy your mental health because this
Hmm.
is really your career. We are all neck up. We don't do as much with our hands as other types of engineers do. And so
Yeah.
burnout affects our particular profession more than most.
Yes.
Leadership is equally affected, strategy roles are equally affected. A lot of product managers burn out too. But it's really the best advice I can give you is first, don't burn yourself out. Second, have multiple revenue streams. Be working on something on the side today, even if you think your job security is very high. Have a little bit of a side business or a side hustle or something that you have working on that's maybe a little bit more professional than a hobby, but still something you enjoy, something that aligns well with your strengths and your interests. So it doesn't feel too much like work.
Yeah.
And be ready, have a plan in place. If you were laid off tomorrow and you couldn't find another job,
Hmm.
what would you do with
Hmm.
that side business to turn it into something that could become an income replacement? Have
Hmm.
that plan and be working towards that at all times. If you can have two or three different income streams, you will be in such better shape for the next 3 to 5 years because you never know. You really never know where this is going to lead you. And I was completely blindsided by
Okay.
being laid off. I did not expect it to happen, but it did. And so having that backup was critical.
And did you have that backup for yourself, or it's just that retrospectively, when you look, you
Yep.
felt that it should have been that you had? Okay.
I didn't do it intentionally. It
Okay.
was, that's why I say that do it intentionally. For me, it was fortunate timing because I was in a
Hmm.
career transition point. I was really getting ready to either take a very senior level leadership position
Hmm.
or transition into product management, product strategy. And I was making the transition as the layoff was, several months off. I was
Yeah.
looking for clients as well as the layoffs were looming. So it was just fortunate timing. Really was good timing for me because the only roles that I could have landed would have
Hmm.
been lateral. I would have been
Yeah.
taking a step into the same role, but far less seniority. It wouldn't have been a great situation. So there was no opportunity for me to step into a better role. There was no opportunity for me that was really equivalent. Anytime you lose seniority, you feel like you take a step
Yes.
backwards. And so
Yeah.
it wasn't going to just take the same role at a different company. And
Yeah.
that's where the business became that was really a wonderful safety net for me. Being able
Yeah.
to, while I was looking for a job, I was also looking for clients just because that's what I'd always been doing. So,
Yeah.
and there the client was.
Yeah. And that's a solid piece of advice. I think doing intentional and going little
Mhm.
above than hobby is the takeaways for me, because when you do it as a hobby, then I think the stakes, you don't really put stakes on the table, and that's when you are
Right.
not really serious with the craft. Maybe you're doing it because you enjoy it, but you
Mhm.
have to, after some point, make it transactional. If somebody is paying you for your time, you need to deliver
Yep.
quality. I absolutely
Yes.
agree with that. And my next question is, how did you find your niche? Like when you started out on your own, how did you decide this is what my forte is? Or did you really leverage your forte, or you went all out and then, did everything possible to get the work done?
It was, like I said, I had a direction originally when I founded the business. I
Hmm.
wanted to do the marketing side. I had ideas in 2010 about what we could do with customers, what
Okay.
we could do with targeted marketing, with customer loyalty, lifetime value, all of these things. Sort of had these ideas in my head. I got to do a
Mhm.
couple of large data projects in my last corporate role. So it was kind of a nice segue. But at the
Okay.
same time, uh, didn't get to do that. I went into, really taking what was available. And it turned out working broadly at that time was great for me because I
Okay.
got exposure to doing data science in different industries. I did a little
Hmm.
bit of computer vision, did some natural language, did pricing, supply chain and optimization, and then the marketing. And then so it was so many different parts and then different industries. I got to see finance. I got to see aerospace and defense. I got to,
Yes.
retail. I worked in recruiting and HR tech. So I got so many different pieces of the puzzle over the course of almost 11 years now. That
Hmm.
turned out to be a great decision. I don't recommend everyone take the generalist approach because
Hmm.
now I think it's much harder to do what I did now, but
Yes.
the breadth of knowledge that I got and the ability to apply data science and what I know to across industries, across company sizes. I think it was amazing. I really like the way it ended up. It was not as intentional as I would have liked it to be.
Hmm.
I would
Hmm.
have liked to have had it follow the plan better. But
Yeah.
sometimes when you're starting a business, it's really where is the customer? And
Yes.
am I, if I stay too rigidly to the
Hmm.
original plan, I may miss out on
Hmm.
a small pivot that could reveal new opportunities. It's critical for businesses to think about we have a niche, we should stay in that niche. But if
Hmm.
there's an opportunity to pivot and there's no loss of focus for the business, it might be worth pursuing to see if that's actually a better niche. And for
Yeah.
me, I eventually landed in a niche, but it's a very mine's interesting because data and AI strategy, product strategy, they are uh, applicable across industries
Yes.
because I've
Yes.
worked across industries. So I am really the example of a very bizarre niche where it's a very small segment,
Yes. Mhm.
but it services pretty close to any business, any enterprise, any industry, even any country, really.
Yes. Yes. I would say that the way you explained your journey, it's very different than what I've heard from many others. But I think that's
Yeah.
where the beauty lies because it's very organic. Like you didn't really push too hard to stick to what you want to do. And
Mhm.
it's best, I think, sheer serendipity that you took on the things and then they kind of added up to those to the place where you are today. But looking back, would you say that whatever wrong happened with you in 2012, for example, I don't think that you would call it wrong now, sitting today.
Not
But do
anymore.
you think that yeah? So do you think that it was because of you who turned it around altogether, or had that thing not happened to you, you would have stayed in the job, a cushion job that nobody wants to leave that 8 to 5 circle, and you would not have explored that side of entrepreneurial spirit in you.
I think I would have eventually, but
Okay.
the need makes you a better salesperson.
Yes. Yes.
There's something about needing a client versus wanting a client
Hmm.
where the year and a half that I was pitching clients before I got laid off, I was far
Hmm.
less effective than the month and a half after I got laid off. I was really good after about 45 days, and I learned and iterated way faster than I did over, I want to say, 15 to 18 months. So I
Okay.
think there is a sense of urgency that changes
Yes.
when you finally make the leap. I don't know how
Hmm.
long it would have taken me. It would have eventually happened, but
Hmm.
I would just like to say to the people that fired me, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for laying me
That's
off. I appreciate that. You did me a solid.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like generally when something wrong happens to somebody, people say, "Why me? Why is it happening to me?" And because you are not able to connect the dots forward, it's always when you look backward. And that's why I'm just asking you those questions for people to understand that we already have an example set in front of us that when you kind of not get bogged down by the situation and you try your best, and at the
Mhm.
same time you really had that back homework done to be at that
Yep.
stage. So yeah, I think you can still turn tables around. Yeah.
And that's the important piece is to have that backup, have one or two backup plans
Yeah.
for, because we all think, okay, if I get laid off, I'm just going to go apply for more jobs.
Hmm.
But have a second plan, have a third plan, and make them real. Have a real, actual functioning plan that
Yes.
would become a business, not like maybe if. Make
Yes.
it a structured, and be flexible like I was. It wasn't perfect. It didn't go exactly according to plan, but there was enough of the framework and structure in place for me to be
Hmm.
successful. And I didn't look like an
Yes.
amateur. I didn't look like I had just shown up, and done this overnight the last 2 evenings, and then came to the presentation with these notes that are jotted down and scribbled on a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
So have a plan, but also have the flexibility to adapt to situations that come up. Sometimes good opportunities present themselves.
Yeah, yeah, so true. And okay, so coming back to your present, we've learned enough of past, and what I want to know about is more of your work, where what kind of skills make a good AI strategist?
I think you have to have the technical background.
Okay.
It's very important in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
because I wouldn't be as effective if I couldn't speak to the product itself, what's being
Mm-hmm.
built, if
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand the initiatives that I was helping to design and develop. Because what starts in the C suite with opportunity discovery has to have some connection to execution.
Hmm.
So I think the technical capabilities are still important, even though we are strategists and work
Yes.
with C levels. I'm also interfacing with data scientists. And you
Mm-hmm.
can lose credibility so quickly
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know what they're doing. And if you don't have that understanding of the technology, you don't understand the paradigm and how to
Hmm.
monetize models, data, analytics, how customers use this. If you've
Mm-hmm.
never deployed a model to production, you don't understand the complexity. You don't
Hmm.
know why data needs to be curated in the way that it
Hmm.
does for model training. And you don't
Yes.
realize why that's different than the way it's built today for digital apps and enterprise applications.
Mm-hmm.
You don't understand what the difference is. So I think the technical capabilities, having done it, having shipped to production, worked really in software engineering and in data science, I think all of that for me is very important. I don't think everyone needs the same exact breadth of experience. It helps me because I can talk to software engineers, I can talk to PMs, I can talk to
Mm-hmm.
data scientists and data engineers and ML engineers, and I speak their language because I've done their job. So I have to
Hmm.
say that part of it makes it a lot easier. It's also easier when I'm talking to the C level because I don't have that shine of the PowerPoint jockey.
Yeah.
The fact that I've built what I'm talking to them about
Mm-hmm.
adds another layer of credibility. And so the
Okay.
communications from a non-technical standpoint even benefit from having a technical background and a technical pedigree. So I would say, just for all those reasons, having the technical abilities is critical. Coming out of an analytics, data science, data engineering, ML engineering, any one of those types of roles, and going into product management, being a data and AI product manager or a data and AI strategist, those are great transferable skills. Then you learn the business. You have to
Yeah.
understand what every business unit does. You have to really get down to the core of what a business model is. What is an operating model?
Mm-hmm.
How do we take products from opportunities to customer hands? How do we return value back to the business?
Mm-hmm.
How do businesses work? How do we get from this concept of a value stream to workflows to the things that are being
Yeah.
done? How do business units return value to the business itself? How
Mm-hmm.
do you do opportunity discovery? What is strategy? What
Yeah.
are the business people learning in their MBAs, and how do I have to change that? So this is more than just business acumen. This is, you have to become a student of business and marketplaces and competitive dynamics, understanding how technology interacts with them, which is something I've never seen this taught in school. It's one of the reasons why I created my classes, because I couldn't find
Yes.
anything. People kept asking
Yes.
me, where do I learn this? And I thought, okay, I need to make these classes because they don't exist. But
Yeah.
that's the important piece. That's why I say both sides are so critical, because on the one hand, you have that almost MBA-ish type background.
Yes.
And on the other side, you have the technology. And you have to see how the technology changes things. How do people pay for the technology? What opportunities does the technology create for
Mhm.
monetization, for efficiency, for productivity? For all of these, how do you make these buzzwords real? How do you actually implement innovation? So I think it's that this is the two sides that you really need. Obviously, you need to be an excellent communicator, but the love for the technology and the business and the love for seeing people engage with products and getting into what makes a product that delights customers or internal users. How do you get that product to fit into their workflow so that it just slips into what they're doing today? It's
Hmm.
almost like you just replace whatever they have and here you go. And
Yes.
it's like they never notice it, but now it's better. And if you don't love that, if you don't enjoy those pieces, it's a very difficult field to fall in love with. But if you have that background and that sort of a passion for it, this is a lot of fun. I love what I do.
It sounds like fun the way you told.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that, everybody used to say AI, data science, apart from being very science oriented or, very
Mhm.
mathematical oriented, it's also an
Yes.
art. And the way you
Hmm.
explained the role of an AI strategist, that also looked like an art because it's not something set in stone. There is no rule
Hmm.
book. There is no playbook that somebody can follow, at least in my eyes. Like you mentioned, there was a gap that you are trying to fill in through your courses. It's not taught in any schools as such so far. So you can't come prepared. If you're an MBA, definitely you have a PowerPoint way of dealing with things, but it takes a
Yep.
lot more than that. Not that I'm not an MBA, so I'm saying these things. Yes, a part of it is because of that.
Yep.
But yeah, but back then when you mentioned that in 2012 when you started in businesses, they need to carve out a lot of budget to set out these
Hmm.
initiatives. And first of all, do you see any change in the trend of how businesses think of AI? Earlier, maybe it was about, okay, let's try something, and it might become a campaign agenda for their business. To now, when they're really uh, pumped up about putting it on the ground, and are they being a little restrictive in, okay, we can't really try too many things at time, and if it doesn't work after n number of times, we really want to call it quits because that's not how we can keep spending the money. So, is there a trend that you've observed being in the industry so far?
Several. I I feel like I was lucky because in 2012 to 2014, I had to pitch.
Yeah.
I had to sell companies on
Hmm.
doing this. Big data was beginning to become
Hmm.
cool and interesting, but there was no such thing as data science.
Yeah.
We didn't in 2012. I didn't even know what my job title was. The
Yeah.
term existed, but none of us knew what we were doing. We all had different names. I was just a technical consultant for a good year and a half. No one had any
Yeah.
idea. And then it was, oh yeah, he's a data science consultant. Overnight, I
Yeah.
became something,
Okay.
different. And so I had to sell it. I
Hmm.
had to explain it. I had to teach it
Hmm.
and really pitch the business, show the value. And I only had one chance. If that initiative flopped, that was the end of it. They weren't bringing me back.
Yeah.
So that was a completely different experience than most people have had coming into the field. Because
Hmm.
once we hit 2015, everyone
Yes.
was hiring data scientists. No one had any idea how to measure ROI. No one
Hmm.
understood what you should be doing in the first place. There were
Hmm.
no expectations. Every company was growing and making a ton of money anyway. So
Yeah.
all of this for a good, it's almost been 8 years now.
Hmm.
It didn't really matter. You just showed up and said, I do data science, and everybody went, oh, hey, here's a check. So it was really easy. But
Yeah.
at the beginning of 2022, it feels like I'm back in 2012. And
Hmm.
now it is, but it's different this time. CEOs, instead of me pitching them, CEOs
Hmm.
are coming to me and saying, what can you build? What can you deliver? What can you
Okay.
create? And
Hmm.
it's what are we going to monetize? What's the returns? What should we expect? How long will this take? And the time horizon for execution, it's back to
Hmm.
where I was in 2012, where it
Okay.
is, what can you give me in, I got 90 days. If it doesn't deliver in 90 days, they don't want to hear about it. They don't
Yeah.
want 3 years. They don't want 2 years. They won't put in a ton of money. They won't make $1 million investment to make 2
Mm-hmm.
million. It better
Mm-hmm.
be 7, 10, 25. They want to see significant returns and they want to see it quickly. So
Okay.
it's almost this boomerang where this
Hmm.
environment is very, very similar to 2012, except I'm not convincing people
Mm-hmm.
that the technology is viable. I'm not convincing them that you really can do something with this. They're
Yeah.
coming pre-qualified. They're coming looking at GPT and everything that
Yeah.
OpenAI has done and Anthropic has done, and
Yeah.
now we have Mid-Journey, and so all of these things are now just right in front of them. They see it, they understand it,
Yeah.
and they want someone who can build revenue streams, who can
Hmm.
build cost savings and improve productivity, and who can build all of these components. They don't know they need AI strategy. So in a
Hmm.
way, I am a little bit back in 2012, convincing companies, hey, okay, so you've got the team, that's great, but if you don't have a strategy, all that monetization never happens. So we
Yes.
need this thing first. So that's the trend. And companies are slowly coming around to realize, okay, technology isn't going to stop changing. Technology isn't
Hmm.
going to stop disrupting. It's
Yes.
continuous now. And so the playbook that I created for data and AI strategy is to take a company and implement technical strategy so that they can handle continuous transformation. But that's the part I have to sell. I have
Yes.
to explain to companies. So now instead of selling the technology and the products and the initiatives and all of that, I have to sell them on there's other stuff we have to do. This
Yeah.
doesn't just drop in and begin to
Yeah.
work. There is
Absolutely.
a problem at the very beginning that we have to solve so that you know what you should be building. You could build
Hmm.
100 different applications. Which one's the right one? Which one has
Yeah.
the highest returns for your business? Which one fits the business model, the operating model?
Hmm.
Which ones do your customers want? Which ones do you have the right data to develop?
Yeah.
All of these different factors, it's complicated. And without a strategy, it never comes together. So that's really,
Yes.
if you want, if I summed up 11 years of where we've been, we're, midpoints, and now where we are, we're to the point where we don't have to sell the technology, but we
Hmm.
have to sell the business on a different type of transformation where it used to be this concept of, oh, we're doing digital transformation,
Yeah.
and cloud's just this thing on top of it, and data is just this thing on top of it, and AI is
Hmm.
just it's continuous. We are transforming every 3 to 5 years now.
Yes.
Transformation never ends. So
Yes.
it isn't digital transformation. You might as well just call it transformation because that's where we're at. So that's the
Yeah.
part that I have to sell. It's always been, I guess I've always been selling something that's a little bit ahead of its time. And this time around, I guess I'm selling technical strategy.
Yeah, and when you mentioned that earlier, maybe you needed to convince somebody, and now people are coming
Mhm.
prepared with very clear-headed now that this is what we want
Yep.
from you, and can you just set us for success? Do you think a part of it is because everybody, right from the execs to definitely the developers, everybody is so ML aware over the time, they
Mhm.
know the capabilities, they are beyond the hype cycle. Do you see that?
Mm.
Not
Oh no,
yet?
they're firmly in the hype cycle.
Okay.
Some of the ideas I get, I wish I could, I wish I could show you some of the texts that I've
Okay.
gotten just in the last couple of days.
Okay.
No, we are still firmly in the hype cycle. I will get
Okay.
C-level leaders texting me at, 8, 9 p.m. their time with an
Mhm.
idea. Hey, is this possible? So
Okay.
could we use this technology to do this? It's great to see the passion. It's amazing to
Hmm.
see the enthusiasm, but I have to always redirect them back to what's possible, but is that what we should be doing?
Yes.
The
Yes.
technology makes it possible, but should we? It's always monetization first. I have to redirect them back to we've got to do this thing first. Is it going to develop a ton of revenue for you? Is that the opportunity you want us to spend these finite resources? We don't have a billion data scientists. We
Yeah.
have this team, and that's it. Getting
Yes.
more data scientists is really hard, and we don't want to spend more. We want to return more. We should be
Yes.
improving our monetization. So it's a different kind of conversation. I think everyone is still in the hype cycle.
Mhm.
I think everyone's more realistic about objectives. Everyone's more pragmatic about expectations. Like no one's expecting to become Google overnight.
Yeah.
No one's going to that extreme anymore. No one thinks they're going to be building their own deep learning teams anymore. So there's an element of pragmatism, but at the
Okay.
same time, we're we're still very deep into extreme enthusiasm, still deep into the optimism, really driving a, if the technology enables it, we should do it mentality. And so the conversations I have are trying to continue and perpetuate the enthusiasm, but
Mhm.
temper it with, remember, this is a business.
Yes.
The business is here to serve our customers or potentially serve new ones.
Yeah.
But if the technology doesn't serve them, we shouldn't be doing it. Or if it serves them badly, let's not do it. Let's do something that's amazing, that customers will love, or that the business becomes far more efficient because of. So, yeah, it's a different kind of conversation. I have to redirect. I used to be the enthusiastic one, but now it's everyone else, and I have to be the, yes, I love
Realistic
it,
one.
but let's make money,
Yeah.
right? We're supposed to make money off of this, right?
Yes, yes. And I love the way you put it that even if technology can make you do that, it is an
Mhm.
enabler. Should we do that is a question we must
Right.
ask ourselves first. And that takes me to the fact that time. So okay, you have the funds, you have everything, but I think time is the
Mhm.
differentiator. It's the
Yes.
leverage that you can take over others, and time is constrained. You really have very limited time to execute so many multiple ideas. And that takes me back to
Mhm.
when we were thinking that when you start a data science initiative team and then you set out on the charter, you get overwhelmed. Oh, I can do XYZ things
Yep.
and all, right? But there are so many ideas, and which one should I pick first? And that brings me
Yep.
back to the concept, like you mentioned, it's opportunity. And how do you know that this
Mhm.
opportunity is something that can be monetized based on this roadmap 3 months down
Yep.
the line, 6 months down the line? So how do you develop an eye or a lens of seeing where the opportunity lies? How do you estimate that? Because there has to be some data driven way of rank ordering
Mhm.
those projects.
Yep. So prioritization framework is where you're starting or where
Mhm.
you're kind of explaining. We need a prioritization framework to defend the data science team.
Mhm.
It's really the thing that stops us from doing endless reporting and analytics and ad hoc requests for
Yeah.
data, because that's what derails data teams. As soon as the rest of the business realizes what they can do with data and analytics, everyone wants data and analytics.
Yes.
And you can overwhelm the data science team. So all they're doing is these requests with almost no return on investment.
Mhm.
So one of the first things that needs to happen is exactly what you said, prioritization framework.
Mhm.
But that doesn't, okay, so we're prioritizing based on value. And I love how you asked the question. So how do we calculate value?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to prioritize the most, the most revenue or cost savings intensive
Mhm.
projects first. But how do you figure that out? So we have to have an opportunity estimation framework. And
Mhm.
those are fairly simplistic. I like, the one I teach is connecting value stream to workflow, because
Mhm.
your value stream explains how the work that the business does either creates value for customers or returns value to the business. It creates something for the business itself. And the
Mhm.
value stream is the definition of that monetization. How does that create value? How does it return value to the business? How does it create and deliver value to customers? So your workflows will always connect to some sort of value proposition. In
Mhm.
some cases, you find out bad news, especially with customers. You're
Yeah.
serving a workflow, they won't pay you for it. And when you begin to, like you said, the data driven approach to this, when you start exploring customer workflows, you
Yeah.
begin to realize there are so many workflows that the business's services that
Yes.
customers are completely unwilling to pay you for. That gets you more focused on the ones that they do pay you for. The things,
Yeah.
and the great thing about data, the purpose of data is to help the business understand itself and understand these complex systems that it operates in. The business itself is a complex system.
Yeah.
Customer marketplaces are complex systems. So we have all of this complexity. And the business has never had data about it before. So it's always had to guess. And now we're
Yes.
introducing data into all of these decisions. So estimation, well, how do we do any other data science project? Well, that's how you
Hmm.
estimate the initiative. Most
Hmm.
of strategy planning actually follows data science workflows. Opportunity discovery is really the only exception. And I teach top down, bottom up. Top down opportunity discovery, you work with the C levels, and
Yeah.
this is the big opportunities that build out your total addressable market and help you find those massive home runs.
Hmm.
But then it's like you're saying, we got time. We have time constraints. We can't do this 3-year initiative. So
Yes.
we have to go through a maturity model. I teach a maturity model to explain how we go from this big opportunity to our first deliverable. But it's not
Hmm.
the entire big bang project. It's a smaller component that returns value in quarterly, if possible, every 6 to 8 weeks. We're returning value, we're shipping to production, returning value to the business, demonstrating that this is still worth continuing with because it continues to increase every time we add on to this
Yeah.
big initiative. Every time we add on incrementally, we incrementally deliver results, we incrementally deliver value. And that proves it's worth doing. Why? Because we're still making you more money. Every time we deliver something, you're either
Yes.
more efficient or you're making more money. And that's top down opportunity discovery, bottom up is frontline workers telling, because we need to make them more data and model literate.
Hmm.
And they are the ones who are closest to those quick wins, near term
Yes.
opportunities. They understand their needs best, they understand customer needs best. They can bring those back to data product managers who can do quick estimation. Is this really worth doing or not? And then send it forward. Now the data team's working on a pipeline
Hmm.
of big innovation initiatives and exploiting existing opportunities for value creation. And you got a data product manager, data and AI product manager sitting in the middle saying, look, no, we shouldn't be doing that. There's no ROI in that. Yes, we should be doing that. There's tons of ROI in that. And this is all facilitated by having a strategy in place
Hmm.
that defines why the business uses data, why it uses analytics, why does it use more advanced models to create and deliver value to customers. If we don't have that, none of this stuff works. So that's we just work backwards really from the data team who feels this pain to
Hmm.
the solution, which is it's enterprise wide. And so estimating opportunities, we treat these things as if they're not data problems, but they are. How would you
Yeah.
estimate anything else? Well, I'm going to gather data and build a
Yes.
model. How else would you do it? And sometimes we make the rest of the business more mysterious than it needs to be. But in reality, what we do as data scientists,
Hmm.
the rest of the business is trying to figure out how to do their jobs more like we do ours.
Yes.
And so it's not so much that data science is superior in some ways. We need the domain expertise, we need the business acumen, we need those specialists in every part of the business who understand what they do better than we can, because that's not our specialty. But at the same time, we can't really change our methodologies because it works everywhere. It's the great thing
Hmm.
about data science and business. The two are so similar that when you introduce data into any process, you typically improve the outcomes.
Hmm.
If you do it well, you improve outcomes. You make the business more transparent. That's never been a bad thing.
Yeah. And when you mentioned that you constantly evaluate and then that's how you create the value chain, right? So
Mhm.
when that evaluation phase happens somewhere in our prior discussion, when you mentioned that now businesses are giving you maybe a time window that this is a 90-day
Yep.
plan, and that's how you need to give them a report at every
Yes.
checkpoint. So that 90-day, is it like right from idea to execution, or is it just like at the strategy level? So what is the expectation
Uh,
these days? Yeah.
Once you have something, an opportunity discovered, if
Hmm.
it's one of those top down ideas, it needs to be
Hmm.
broken up because it's a big long term initiative.
Hmm.
But the business won't just accept that this
Hmm.
is going to be built in one monolithic phase and you won't get anything until I'm done. They won't do that. So
Okay.
you have to break these initiatives up
Hmm.
into smaller, quarterly, faster if possible. Like I said,
Hmm.
6 to 8 weeks is my ideal delivery cadence. And being able to deliver value every single time in the cycle.
Hmm.
That's why it's critical to break the initiative up into smaller value generating chunks and let it follow a maturity model where it
Hmm.
goes from a very small project, very small deliverables just keep getting added on top of it. And
Hmm.
eventually you have the big initiative, the big innovation that we were talking about in opportunity discovery, but you can't deliver it that way. So as soon as the initiative is scoped, that's when you have to start the delivery process. The big challenge is research doesn't deliver on a schedule.
Yes.
So there has to be an entirely different process built to manage the research lifecycle, because that can't be put on a roadmap. We don't know when that will finish. I'll bet you if you'd talked to Microsoft and said, when will you be able to integrate chat GPT into Word and have this Copilot 365 Copilot, they'd have said,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, um,
And there won't
they
be an
made
exact
space
answer.
for it. They were ready
Yeah.
for it, but they didn't know when it was going to complete. So
Yes.
there has to be something there. If Word was returning zero value, it wouldn't have been accepted. There would be no way that Microsoft would say, well, we can't deliver the next version of Word. I'm sorry, we're waiting for this thing. So you have to have in place components. And they were able to deliver value with earlier versions where they were very targeted about the features that they rolled out. And so as GPT became increasingly functional and increasingly reliable and handled more and more types of use cases, you could see that it wasn't like they, as soon as it was ready, then said, okay, now what do we do with it? They figured that out way in advance. And they were incrementally delivering features and functionality as the models were progressing. And as soon as the model was ready to go, it got integrated and shipped. I mean, the rate that they have been delivering product with GPT since the 3.5 release,
Yeah.
think about what they've delivered since September. It's
Yes.
been just a hurricane of functionality and new monetization avenues for them. And that's the new paradigm. We have to break these initiatives down, and we have to manage that research, that uncertainty. So there's so much complexity that didn't exist with the software development lifecycle and digital product management that now exists with data and AI product management and the data science life cycle, which is actually multiple life cycles. So this is more complex. This is a level of complexity that most businesses aren't used to dealing with. But it's not, it's not untenable. It's obviously something that businesses can manage because there's tons of success stories out there.
Yeah, and that reminds me of one very light-hearted situation that I was doing that planning stage in one of my ex-companies, and we were going through staffing, and during those quarterly meetings, we were just thinking, okay, how many people are available, and this is what we want to do, and how to break it down, and whether we are setting ourselves to success, what is the run rate. And then one person said that because we are working on AI and because that involves a lot of research, we don't really need to budget for the staffing. Maybe we need to budget for the uncertainty. That's what we need to account for, and that's the bigger chunk of our entire pipeline. So yeah, I think that's true. And coming back to when you were saying that we need to start from small deliverables, and then on top of that, you need to
Yes.
incrementally build. And that's the part of that continuous transformation as well that you were bringing in earlier. Now, for ML workflows, mostly it happens that you have to adopt an agile method where you start with something. You can't, no? Okay. Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
don't do agile. No, finish your
Okay.
question, but don't do agile. Don't do it.
Okay. Okay,
No,
I'll
no,
come
finish
back
your
to this.
question. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
So generally we see that you are set up with a moonshot, that you deliver
Mm-hmm.
some, you promise for something, and then you kind of try to break it down. That's little, I think, a different approach which should not be adopted, but that's how I've seen in the industry. You sign up for moonshot, and then you realize in order for me to deliver or ship that capability, I need to do XYZ stuff first. That means that
Yep.
that's the groundwork I need to do to be able to reach that level. Maybe it's three years down the line or so. So when we are planning and strategizing, how do you see that we need to pick up we need to be very conscious of what initiatives we are picking up, which is going to lay down the groundwork for the work that's going to build on top of it. So that's an incremental piece of work. You can't really do the X thing if you don't have a Y thing set in place.
Yes. So, and the way you framed it was perfect
Okay.
because you really showed, you almost said the problem as you were explaining what you were doing to solve it. Because you said, and I got this big moonshot and then I had to break it down. Well, then how did they decide that that was the right moonshot? Because
Yes.
they didn't understand how it would deliver value.
Hmm.
And they delivered it to you first. Shouldn't you have been involved in figuring out what the moonshot is going to cost,
Yes.
how long it would take to deliver the moonshot, what would be involved, where were the uncertainties, especially the research processes where you are performing experiments or potentially researching novel model architectures.
Mhm.
Shouldn't you be involved in
Yes.
explaining not the technical details, but the potential impacts?
Hmm.
What if one of those research initiatives fails?
Yeah.
They made a decision to take on a moonshot, but they didn't understand all the risks they were signing up for. That's where businesses fall into bear traps
Hmm.
because they're not involving someone who has that technical capability,
Hmm.
who has the understanding of what it really takes to build these things, who can not only explain full costs, timelines, but also those risks. We think about the rewards way too much. A joke about a 3 slide presentation. First slide is
Mhm.
AI, it's amazing. Second slide, completely blank. Third slide, profit, billions of dollars will show up.
Yes.
And we need somebody to fill in slide 2. We don't
Yeah.
involve that group
Mhm.
into the strategy planning process, which is where
Yes.
technical strategy comes in, which is where data and AI strategists come in, data product managers follow right behind them.
Yeah.
So you're not being in that room means that the decision was made without enough information to make a good one.
Yes.
And the business could be walking itself into a bear trap. And that's the reason why I say agile. You can't do agile for data
Mhm.
science. Data engineering, some parts of data engineering work with
Mhm.
agile. Some parts of model development and ML engineering work with agile. But the
Mhm.
majority of your data science life cycle,
Mhm.
it won't work with agile because agile still has an estimation component to it.
Hmm.
I can estimate complexity, but you're then trying to connect a complexity estimation to a timeline. I can't always give you that.
Yes.
So there needs to be a different managed process that's entirely separate from agile because we're not developing software. We're writing code, yes. We're not developing software. Models don't work that way. So when we're building data sets and curating data, if
Mhm.
the answer was obvious, if we knew what the model needed to do, we could just use code
Yeah.
to logically hard code the behavior we wanted. If it was simple and we knew what we were going to end up with, we should just be using software. Let's just
Yeah.
do it the easy way.
Mhm.
But we're not given those projects. The way that data and models create value for the business is different, manages
Hmm.
complexity, reduces uncertainty. And with those two tenets, you do something better with data and AI that you can't do with software. You can't do it with the cloud or IoT or any of the other technologies you have.
Mhm.
So those are different by nature when it comes to the project itself. So you need processes in place to manage the product that are different because the monetization's new. You
Mhm.
need processes to handle the project that are different because the life cycle's new. Companies have not come to terms. That's why I say this is a strategy problem, because if
Yeah.
none of this is in place, you get a moonshot dropped on your desk with,
Yes.
a post-it note that says good luck. And
Yeah.
everything you need, you're talking about all those small things that you needed in advance before you can get this done. The
Yes.
business made its decision, the go no go, having
Mhm.
no idea that all of that had to be done.
Hmm.
And so that was not part of the cost, the estimation, timeline, any of that. So none of that was given to you in a way that sets you up for success. You have to go back to the business
Mhm.
and say, well, so you didn't do all the steps right the first time. And so now we're sort of backtracking, and I'm going to, or data teams cover up for it, especially data engineering teams where they have to put in place some infrastructure and put the pipelines in place before you can even get the data to where it needs to be in order to start the initiative. Sometimes the data as it's been gathered, because it was gathered for an application purpose,
Mhm.
it's not
Mhm.
the right format. It doesn't have all the
Yeah.
metadata that you, it's
Yes.
missing all of that. And so none of that was done up front.
Mhm.
And because it wasn't, the business just signed up for something that may have negative ROI.
Hmm.
And so you have to go back and clean up this mess. And that's why, as that's why this is it's a great problem. It's fun to solve, but businesses walk into these bear traps all the time. It's why so many initiatives end up failing,
Hmm.
because it's that second time where you have to come back and say, okay, so there's all this other stuff that was involved that you didn't get told about. And no one at the C level wants to hear that. They really
Yeah.
do. Senior leaders don't want to hear you messed up. You didn't estimate this right. You didn't put all the factors. They don't want to hear that. But
Yeah.
that's the reality of it. That's why so many of these initiatives fail, is there's a lot more to it than just the technology.
Yeah. And you rightly put it that when you sign up for something and you really don't have the right ingredients to achieve that, so you're
Mhm.
setting yourself for failure. But because the goal has been set for you, that's the goalpost you need to achieve. Now people are trying to work their way backwards and somehow trying to make it work under tight deadlines, because you really don't have luxury, like you can endlessly do those research and come back saying that did it work, did it not. So
Yep.
that's when I see that AI fatigue sets in. A, your project has not been delivered successfully. B, your team's morale is down because they tried left, right, center, and they couldn't make it work because the things were not really set up in the first place. So, yeah, this is, I think, been long in the industry that we see AI fatigue. But the, I think the best way to clean up that mess is to start at to have the right goals.
It really is. I understand not every business is going to try to be Meta or
Yeah.
Microsoft. So I'm not saying, we're going to all become these extremely capable R&D shops for data science and machine learning models. But I think it's important that we set up the processes and set up the strategy in
Mhm.
such a way that the business is set up for success and the data team is set up for success. Because if we don't do that, the situation you just described, that happens
Yes.
every year.
Hmm.
And after two or three of these failures, I mean, they're not looking at each other at the C level and saying it's our
Hmm.
fault. They're looking
Yeah.
at the data team and saying, why can't you execute? So there's this. And so it is a lack of many things. Obviously, not only a C-suite problem. I'm not throwing them
Yes.
under the bus. There's a lot of
Hmm.
problems that need to be fixed and addressed, but it really is a business-wide transformation,
Hmm.
not just a technology problem. There's a business problem to be solved. Your
Hmm.
business model and your operating model need to transform. You need a concept of a technology model,
Hmm.
and to track what parts of the business and the product that technology now handles, because if it creates or delivers value to customers, it needs a strategy. So all of these components, data teams, and even some of the biggest and most technically mature
Hmm.
businesses on earth, data teams are set up to fail simply because the strategy components aren't there. And it's hard to watch. You're right. It's that AI fatigue, but it's both sides. Data science team is tired, but the business is equally tired. They are equally fatigued.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And somewhere you mentioned that anything that we pick up as part of a strategy, it needs to have a monetization value attached to it at one point or the other, for example, which means that there is a value generation at some point that's happening and you are creating an impact, either for the end user or maybe for the internal processes where the cost measures come into the picture. And impact is, I think, when you talk to execs and everyone, it's there on everyone's mind when you pick up a project, and there are multiple dimensions to it. But I've also seen that impact is something which may not be, you are not able to realize that impact maybe today, but it is helping you set up for a project in which you can quantify it. For example, if you're improving a customer engagement, there are multiple such intangible ways to measure the impact. But the point is, because it's intangible, we need to know from you, maybe with the help of an example, that how would you consider measuring such impact?
Well, you measure it up
The in
front.
the intangible ones as
Theoretically,
well?
that's how you're
Okay.
supposed to measure it, is up front. But
Okay.
you're right. We don't really, none of us live in the perfect world.
Hmm.
So sometimes this is something that you get handed,
Hmm.
or you find the opportunity yourself. The data science teams should be working with the rest of the business to find opportunities. But more
Hmm.
times than not, that means we're going on like a road show, trying to sell different organizations on doing an initiative here or initiative there. And so we have to define this stuff from a value perspective
Yeah.
ourselves and do it up front. What I always tell data scientists is the easiest way is that workflow. Get
Hmm.
close to customer and internal user workflows. If you support a marketing team, figure out the workflow.
Hmm.
What is their workflow? How does that workflow touch customers? What do customers do with marketing? What is
Hmm.
their workflow when it comes to marketing? Map it out, because that workflow connects to value somewhere.
Hmm.
Internal work that's being done, those workflows that produce value for customers. If it's a marketing team, how do you get to an ad? How does that happen?
Hmm.
What does this team produce? It can't just produce, clicks or something else. What else does it
Yeah.
do?
Hmm.
What are the workflows? What do people do? Where are the value creation mechanisms happening?
Hmm.
Those are workflows. If you understand the workflow, you can create a connection between that workflow and value. And if
Hmm.
you can do that, every initiative now has a connection to an outcome. And if you understand how to break down workflows and how to define value in connection with workflows, everything you do can be very easily estimated.
Hmm.
If you don't do that, then you're guessing, because you're disconnected. When you come at it through the data doesn't have all of the business context necessary to see the workflow or whatever process generated that data. Unless it was gathered very intentionally, you usually lose that context, metadata, whatever way that you end up gathering it. So you have no idea what the value creation behind it is. You have to guess, you have to sort of reassemble all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But if you start from that, it's a whole lot easier to not only discover opportunities, but also to estimate the impact that you're having when you
Hmm.
propose making a change, because that's what you're doing. If the workflow remains the same, you've had zero impact.
Hmm.
If you haven't improved a KPI, you've had zero impact. If the customer is not paying more, you've had zero impact. If there are not more customers, you've had zero, and so these are all pretty simple when you look at it from the perspective of the workflow. But
Hmm.
when you try to look at it from the perspective of the data, when it
Hmm.
doesn't have that context, that's why we have so much struggle
Hmm.
defining our value and our impact. It's because we look at it from behind the data, not from the places where we actually have impact.
What kind of questions generally AI strategists or anybody who is working on an AI initiative needs to ask themselves and to the business to collaborate and have that unison where they're working in tandem? So bringing out those elements and seeing, is this really possible? Asking those right set of questions, taking those trade-offs and calling the shots finally is important. And you've done that beautifully. And I think the reason for which I brought up that example is totally done. So with that, the last point
Good.
which I wanted to ask you is that once an impact has been made, there's you need to prove that it's coming from your intervention. So attribution analysis. So is it really? I think that's also a tricky game. So how do you do that?
No, but remember, I defined exactly what my impact was
Yeah.
because it's connected to the workflow. I
Hmm.
said, this is the change that would happen.
Yeah.
And so now you can just measure that. I have laid out my graph. And so
Yeah.
all I have to do to say, did this actually happen, is watch my graph. I have a very simple, it's not a causal graph. Obviously, you don't have, if you get evidence for causal, it's an amazing
Yeah.
day. You should celebrate. It rarely happens that way, but we
Yeah.
are working towards causal graphs. We are working towards causal methods. So that should be the goal. The structure
Hmm.
is exactly the same. If I say my hypothesis is I will be able to have this impact on the workflow, I will
Hmm.
be able to get, a third of people that leave because they don't find something in the search to find something in the search.
Hmm.
And my hypothesis is that that will lead to some sales.
Hmm.
I've created the graph, implement it, watch. You've called your shot. You've defined the workflow. You've
Hmm.
defined, based on my intervention, this thing that I'm going to implement in the search to improve it. I now believe that it will change the workflow.
Hmm.
So by introducing an improvement to the data that we provide customers in their workflow when they're searching, I believe that improvement will lead to 30 something percent now finding the thing that they want.
Hmm.
And that will cause more sales. They will not leave. And
Hmm.
that's all I have to prove, is that I've done that. And now we watch the impact on sales. Did it move the needle? Do those
Yeah.
people who go through this workflow, who fit this feature set of segmentation, when they find, did this intervention actually help them find what they were looking for in the search? And when they do they then, what happens next? What's the next step
Yeah.
in the workflow for them? My hypothesis was it will lead to more sales.
Hmm.
Do they successfully complete the search and then go and buy? And that's
Hmm.
how you're stalking these people. You create the logging because you have a digital application. Every time they do anything, you can log it. So you just log the journey. And if you have called your shot appropriately and
Hmm.
mapped the workflow and mapped your variables properly, and if your hypothesis is actually valid,
Hmm.
then what you said happens will happen. And it's
Hmm.
so much cleaner to create these graphs and to showcase it this way because you've told the business exactly what to expect. And so if that happens, mission accomplished.
Yeah. And I was just thinking that when we make an intervention, so in order for you to attribute it to that, it's because I introduced a change. You have to
Mhm.
have, the world is not, it's not an ideal world. So everything else
No,
being constant, you can say
never.
that the change is giving you what you
No.
intended for. So because you are not really able to control the external factors, it could be that it's happening organically, that maybe it's this peak season time and the competitors are not having a good pricing strategy, and that's how people are landing more onto your page, and regardless the experience, they are signing or checking out. So that's what I was just meaning, that controlling the external variables is difficult, but you still need to say that, okay, barring everything in the outside my ecosystem which I'm trying to control, this is how my change is impacting the end goal that I signed up for.
But remember, in that case, you don't have full exposure, you don't have full control of the workflow.
Yeah.
And so that's what you have to advertise up front.
Okay.
I don't have full control of this workflow. So I need to get really creative with my experiment
Hmm.
because I still have to convince business users that
Hmm.
this experiment is worth funding. I
Hmm.
have to either have a data and AI product manager evaluate it. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, the rest of the data team's looking at it to make sure I didn't do something from a research or study design perspective that's questionable, which happens a lot. But you're also having somebody from the business perspective look at it and say,
Hmm.
yeah, that holds water. I could see it.
Yes.
But that also means they're accepting the risk and the uncertainty. You advertise it up front. And that's why
Okay.
it's important to work with the business. And it's not
Hmm.
a lengthy series of meetings. It's just that one interaction where you say, so here's the workflow the way it is now. Here's what our
Hmm.
customers are doing now. I want to introduce this change. Here's the treatment. Here's the intervention. I believe, and here's my data supporting this, flimsy or great. You
Hmm.
bring what you got.
Yeah.
Flimsy or great evidence. Here's what I have to support this intervention potentially leading to, but I don't really know because I don't control that part of the workflow. I
Hmm.
also don't have any visibility into that part of the workflow. And so this is a very creative experiment. However, there are so many unknowns here
Hmm.
and you just advertise and you say, look, this is how this stuff works now.
Hmm.
I have a good evidentiary case. And if you're on board with it, let's do it. If you look at this and say, I just don't see it, let's not do it. I'll do something else. We have all of these other
Yeah.
opportunities in the pipeline. I can be doing a ton of other stuff. If you don't like this one, let's go to the next
Communication is the key.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's
All right.